And the way I used to, control my business was I just scattered seeds everywhere, and I didn't really care as long as they bore some fruit. I was happy, But these days, really since the middle of 2019, I started really focusing on, cultivating the ground, plowing it up, planting seeds in rows that are verticals, right? And fertilizing them and watering them. And, the good Lord provides sunshine. And those, what's happened now through the podcast and through the lead nurturing funnels and all the other things that we do, the column and the book and all that kind of stuff, what it's led to now is that we're harvesting crops. We're not just picking, fruit that may have fallen in the cracks between the pavers, and all of a sudden a plant grows up and bears some fruit. So it's being more intentional, being more thorough, being more helpful to people, and really trying to make a difference in our community here in West Virginia.
Welcome to Over a Pint, where we focus on the fast-paced and ever-changing world of marketing, told through the eyes of three industry veterans with over 75 years of in-the-trenches experience. No theory here. This is real-world, practical experience told to you by those who have been there, and that includes our guests. So grab a pint of your favorite local brewski or whatever your choice of drink may be, and join us for the show. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Pat McGovern, New Business Director at Acedia, digital shop here in Milwaukee. Brian Meehan, president of Celtic, a full-service ad agency, proudly located here in the Brew City. And I'm Kurt Lingle, vice president at Celtic. Today, we are super excited to be joined by Jim Matuga. Jim is the founder and president of InnerAction Media, a marketing agency in Morgantown, West Virginia. He also has a book available on Amazon titled Marketing Matters, and he is the host of a national weekly podcast called Positively West Virginia, where each week they feature positive stories of West Virginia companies and West Virginia business leaders that are doing great things in the Mountain State. So every so often you come across folks in your career who have made either a positive impression on you or they were a mentor, whatever it might be. And that was kind of the case here with Jim Matuga. I was fortunate enough to crisscross paths with Jim very early in my career when we both worked for a national media company. Jim was my colleague. He worked out of our office in West Virginia in Morgantown, and I was in Milwaukee. I think we worked together for maybe a year or two. It wasn't too long, but even then I could see that Jim had the smarts, the personality, and the genuine integrity to move on to bigger and better things. And somehow, strangely enough, he and I have stayed in contact over all of these years, and it's been a pleasure to see the course Jim's career has taken and the successes that have come his way, because he certainly deserves all of it. So, Jim, Mr. Blast from my past, welcome to Over a Pint.
I love it. Thanks for that awesome introduction, Kurt, and Brian and Pat. It's great to be with you guys today. And yeah, I am certainly blessed and thankful that our paths did cross, Kurt. Back it was like 1996, 97, 98 in that range. But yeah, it was great.
Goes back a long way. So Jim, we have a tradition on our show. Before we get into this, it is called Over a Pint.
Yes.
And there's a reason why we call it Over a Pint, because we have these conversations over a glass of whatever your choice might be. So I'd like to start with our guest, Jim Matuga. Jim, what are you enjoying today during our conversation?
Well, absolutely. I've got a pint of Screech Owl Brewery. It's called Who's Your Daddy IPA. and I think it's fitting because, Kurt and I, the company we work for is called Rudder Communications at the time, Rudder Media at the end of it, but they were based in Muncie, Indiana. And so, I mean, that's how Kurt and I met as Hoosiers, so Who's Your Daddy IPA. And I'm going to add, I put a special touch on this. I'm drinking it out of a Final Four Indianapolis commemorative pint glass from 2010. That was the year that the Mountaineers, West Virginia University Mountaineers, went to the Final Four in Indianapolis. So it's a special commemorative Hoosier mug. hosting my Who's Your Daddy IPA.
It all ties together here. Wow.
It sure does. It does. Brian, what are you enjoying today?
I'm in Ireland today, and I think I
Okay.
was maybe last time, but I'm enjoying Schmittix lately, especially the new bottle with the red label. Very different from when they first came out years ago. But yeah, we're keeping it Irish today.
Awesome.
Mr. McGovern.
Well, I've been getting a lot of heat because I've been drinking the same thing, but I mixed it up. I mixed it up today, guys. I'm going with it's kind of podcast favorite is the Three Sheeps Brewing. I went with Water Slides India Pale Ale. Right.
Great.
Nice.
Switched it up.
Excellent.
That's a great beer. Doing Sheboygan proud. And I am finishing it off with I like this brewery. They're out of Waukesha, Wisconsin, just a little west of here. It's Raised Grain Brewing Company, and I am drinking their Black Walnut Belgian Imperial Stout. Not the first time I've had that beer on this show, but it is very good. So cheers, gentlemen. It's great to be here with all of you.
Cheers.
So, all right. So I'm going to start it off here. And Jim, I want to start off with, you're a storyteller. This has been your world throughout your career in one way or another. What's your short story? Give us your elevator speech and tell us who you are, what your DNA is all about.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate, again, the opportunity just to be here with you guys. I mean, Pat, Brian, Kurt, I mean, it's awesome and it's an honor. And, I often talk about, the media business. It's been my career path ever since, I graduated from West Virginia University with a degree in journalism and advertising back in 1988. But honestly, it goes back way further than that. I'm a musician, a drummer. I love music. I remember, when I was in grade school, in the second, third, fourth grades, making mixtapes on cassette decks and having like my little turntable and making little fake interviews, for my buddies, So I was into audio production back in grade school. So that's how far it takes me. And so I love the media. I love everything about media and being able to tell stories. I think of the old town crier when they used to ring the bell and read the headlines in the colonial days here in our country. But honestly, when I graduated from college, what I wanted to do, my dream was to own a marketing and advertising agency, and I felt like I got a really great opportunity. Started in radio as a copywriter for a local radio station, writing radio ads, and I could not. I just couldn't believe the first time I heard my words that I wrote being read on the radio. It was like, I was like, I did that. That's so cool. And I really caught the bug for the creative aspect. But then I had this really great chance to go out on a sales call with a station owner one day. And I was mesmerized by like him talking to a business owner saying, hey, let us help you get more customers into this pizza shop. And I was like, and he was driving like a Porsche 928 twin turbo, the whole nine. And I was like, that's the job I want. I don't want to necessarily write anymore. I want to get out and be a business guy. And so I started down that path. And every time along the way, I worked in newspaper. I worked at, Kurt and I worked at Rudder and selling cable avails on the local cable systems in our market, worked in broadcast TV. And along the way, every time I took a promotion or a pay raise, it took me further from my goal of being an agency owner, which is what I wanted to do. But what was neat about it, and you guys probably can relate to this, is that I kept, as soon as the internet started happening, I was like, that is going to be transformative, right? And so I was in on the early days, and it was like, even back in the newspaper days, nobody wanted to deal with the website. I was like, I'll do that. I was the advertising, guy, but I also knew that this was where everything was going. So from a very early age, being part of the digital revolution was really awesome and really transformative in my career. And it seemed like, not to say that I was ahead of the curve all the time, but I was lucky to make changes in my career path that enabled me to stay like a step ahead. I could see the wave coming and I wanted to be on top of the wave as being crushed by the wave. And so that's kind of my career path.
Yeah. It's your story is an interesting one. And like everyone, there's crossroads in a career when, you know, your head or others are telling you to turn right, but sometimes your gut is telling you to turn left. And you know, you kind of touched on that a little bit, where, you know, you kind of got into, you know, a little more on the digital side. Maybe talk a little bit about that. If there's like one or two crossroads that you can really recall, Jim, where, you know, these were pivotal decisions that you had to make, or you did make, and it changed the course of your career for the better, or maybe, you know, maybe it was slip. Talk to maybe about maybe one or two pivotal crossroads that you came across in your career.
Absolutely. It was back in, you know, 2007. Probably one of the largest one. I had a great job. I was working at the local newspaper. I was like #2 in command underneath the publisher, and had a lot of great perks with that job. You know, the country club membership, the company car, and everything. And I got courted to become a general manager for a TV station, an NBC affiliate. And I was like, I even went to our publisher and I was like, look, you know, I've been offered this job. What should I do? And he was like, I'd take it, because you don't have anywhere to go here. My brother, it's like a family newspaper. He's like, I'm not going to be able to relinquish the publisher position, so you're as high as you can go here. I would take that job. So that's exactly what I did. And it was pretty cool, because I got to really be on the forefront of the digital media explosion right then. That was when, you know, we were coming into that recession, and it was like a digital first mindset that I was bringing to the TV station, which was kind of crazy. I was leading the team, and they were all fighting it, but it was a real opportunity, but it was also a challenge to get them to rethink, you know, digital first, right? Hey, you want us to put something on Facebook before it goes on the air? Yes. Yeah. And so that was kind of the thing. And that was definitely a pivotal decision, because it also got me more into video production, which is really one of my true passions. And I love video. And then I'd say the final, you know, crossroads that was really important was, you know, taking the leap back in 2011 to start this company. And that, you know, honestly, it was a tough time in my life. I was going through some pivotal personal things, you know, divorce and everything. I was like, you know, if I'm going to do it, I got to do it now, because the clock is ticking. And that was really amazing, and being able to step out there and say, okay, finally, after all these years, I get to be an agency owner. And of course, it was just me at the time, and then I ended up having a partner join me a couple months later.
Hey, Jim, you know, it's funny, Kurt and I are business owners too, and the one thing I think, the myth that's out there, is the stars just come aligned, and there's that sign that says today's the day. You know, it doesn't happen that way. It always comes a lot of times in times of shift, change, things going on in your life. I mean, I remember when Kurt and I became business partners, my wife was pregnant with her second child, you know, and you're sitting here going, geez, I got a 1.5-year-old and another one on the way, and let's do this. Let's jump in, you know? So I always try to tell that to entrepreneurs. If you wait for the stars to align, you'll probably never own a business. Sometimes you just got to take that leap.
Exactly. And I think that's so true. And, you know, in my case, you know, let me put it this way, you know, today in the world today, you have the side hustle, which that wasn't a thing back in the day. You know, when I was, you know, 10 years ago, it wasn't really a thing. But entrepreneurs today, you know, I feel like it's pretty cool, because you could actually, instead of taking that giant leap of faith, you can actually take a step of faith today, and it makes the transition almost a little bit easier. But by the same token, you know, you got to be all in when you're a business owner. You got to be all in. You know, start.
You know, it's funny with the entrepreneur. It's funny you bring that up, because obviously you have a very entrepreneurial background, but and I think you started to get into it a little bit right here, Jim. But you know, Brian, you're right too. It's like, you know, sometimes the stars don't align. It's not always that perfect aha moment where it's like, yes, this is what I have to do. Sometimes we're thrust into these situations. You know, Jim, you know, based on your experiences and your life lessons, you know, I mean, what advice would you give to, you know, an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, someone that's, you know, thinking about trying to, you know, strike it on their own? I mean, what are some of the lessons you've learned, and what advice would you give someone?
Yeah, I mean that's a question I ask on my podcast every episode. So I've thought about this a lot, and I think what it comes down to is, you really have to understand why you're doing something. I think it's been said you got to find your why. You have to know your why and all that. But really understanding that, being in tune with like, this is my purpose. This is what I was put on earth to do. That to me is like the real calling, in a life. And it doesn't have to be, doing, a mission trip halfway across the world. It could be doing something meaningful right in your community, right where you live. And that to me is the thing, is like, find that niche, solve a problem for a constituent group, and make sure that, yeah, you have to have a business plan and all that. I mean, I think I told you guys at one point that I had a business plan, and like the first week in, I was like, that's not going to work. So have a plan, but also be ready to adapt. And I think if nothing else, 2020 really taught us that you've got to be flexible. You've got to be able to adapt and change. And if you would have told me back in January of 2020 that I would have a remote workforce for a couple of months, I would have said, what does that even mean? How does that even work?
Yeah.
You have to be flexible, but go with your why. Understand what your calling is and what you're trying to accomplish, and then that really fuels everything. It's not about a P&L. I mean, I think you guys would agree. It is about the P&L. Don't get me wrong, but it's way bigger than that. And it's
agreed.
How can you impact in a positive sense your community? And honestly, being a business owner, you're the leader. And how do you lead? How do you lead people? Because you certainly can't do it on your own.
That's a great point. Well, let's fast forward then. Let's talk about some of the things you're doing right now.
Yep.
And the two we want to talk about are InnerAction Media, and we want to talk about your podcast. Let's start with InnerAction Media first. So obviously, talk to us a little bit briefly about your business, what you do, and maybe just the types of businesses that you're going after, your markets, what's your sweet spot, and how you really market to those businesses and find them, and reversely then communicate this offering that you have that they would need from you. Talk a little bit about InnerAction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to. Thank you for that opportunity. We started in 2011, so we're in our 10th year. And that, like I said, that to me is fascinating in itself. That I was able to keep the ship floating for 10 years. I kind of joke about that, but it's a lot of fun. I have a great team. But what we do primarily is, as a marketing agency, is we help our clients talk to the right people at the right time with the right message. And so we help them identify their audience. We help them simplify, clarify, and amplify, and I can talk a little bit about that, their marketing message, so that people will listen to it, they'll read it, and they will respond the way that we want them to respond, a call to action. And so we do that through a variety of means. Our real passion and our real strong suit is our storytelling ability. And we do that primarily through video. We have a very robust video team. We crank out a lot of videos here. But what makes it special is the story process that we use. We kind of adopted back in 2017 Donald Miller's building a story brand process, the 7 steps to telling a great story. We were already doing those things, but he kind of put it into layman's terms and things that we can explain to our clients. And that really helped us advance that whole mission. We do websites and build websites and SEO and search engine marketing and content development, everything from media releases to blog content, social media. And then, of course, the amplification model that I mentioned is, media placement. We don't do a lot of media buying like traditional, although we do some, and not just in West Virginia, but across the country for certain clients. One of our largest clients is a company called MHIRJ, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and then RJ stands for Regional Jet. They have a couple of regional jet rehab facilities around North America. They're based in Canada, and that's one of our largest clients. So it's an international deal, and it's a lot of fun serving them and working with them. At Tucson, Arizona, and Bridgeport, West Virginia, they're two main places, their main hubs in the United States. But that's kind of a cool thing. We work a lot with medical and healthcare. Our first client that we signed was a large hospital right here in Morgantown, and that was pretty cool. Getting that call on the very first day that I opened my business. In the first hour, the CEO called me. We'd served on the chamber together, chamber board together, and he's like, "Hey, I heard you started your company." So we've worked ever since that very first week.
Wow.
We've served healthcare clients.
10 years later.
Yeah.
And just
that's fantastic.
So everything from private practices to medical, chiropractors to dental clinics to dermatology, orthopedics. I mean, so healthcare is big, and truthfully, I love that market sector because my wife Rebecca, she's a PharmD by training, and she works at our large medical institution here, West Virginia University, WVU Medicine, but. Or we don't live in a big market. We're at the 43rd largest or smallest state in the country. So we're a small market, even though we're in the Pittsburgh DMA. So we have to be diverse. So our client list also includes construction and construction affiliated. We work with an architect, heavy industrial contractors, two of those, residential home builders to commercial construction. And then we work with professional services, everything from banks to lawyers. We have those are our three primary verticals that we serve, all the services that we kind of mentioned there. That kind of help explain it a little bit.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
Jim, guys, when was it? One of our earlier podcasts, we were talking to a fellow by the name of Dan Zawacki. Dan is a leadership coach, and he's dealing with a lot of small and mid-sized businesses. We asked him, hey, Dan, when you're talking to people, when you're starting up with them, what's the number one problem that you encounter with these? And the number one thing you said too, was just getting them to understand who their audience is.
Yeah.
You would think that would be just like the slam dunk. And so often it's not the case. Either, they may have an idea of what the customer used to be, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but that customer has totally evolved, moved on, something else, right? So that's just a big deal. And you're echoing what he said. Yeah,
absolutely. And, I think the one thing that I see, I agree with that, really in large part. And I'd say the other thing that I think that most business owners don't realize that they have a problem with, but I see it every day, and you guys being in the business too would probably agree with this. When you ask most entrepreneurs, most business owners or leaders to give their 30-second pitch, in other words, what is it you tell people you do? They most of the time they fail. And I was actually guilty of that in a large part, and I had to really work on that, and so I always try to break that down. I find that that's a really good talking point. When I'm meeting with somebody, first of all, what's your 30-second pitch? And after they hem and haw around, I'm like, oh, what does that actually mean? I don't get it. You guys probably see that a lot, right? I mean, I see it every day. We'll talk about the podcast a little bit later, but I ask that question every single time. What is your 30-second pitch? And I really kind of developed a little process of how we talk about those things. Who do you help is like step one. Who do you help? That's the audience that you just mentioned, Patrick. What do you help them overcome? And then how do you help them specifically? So thinking about again, framing the story, and the hero of the story is not the business that that you own, right? That you're marketing. The hero of the story is actually your customer. We flip that narrative and say, okay, the hero is the customer that you're trying to go after. And it may be, by the way, multiple audiences, right? Because you may have multiple service lines, multiple product lines that you're trying to reach, different customers for each one. So you have to have those audience personas developed where you can deliver that correct message to that person to compel them to what you want them to do.
Yeah, you're right. It is that 30-second elevator speech is not an easy thing to do, and it's so critical because you need to. I mean, it's not only about communicating that to other audiences or your internal stakeholders, your own employees, but I mean, you have to really understand what it is, and you have to get behind it, and you have to believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about it, Kurt. I mean, most businesses talk about themselves, right? What the consumer cares about is what's in it for me.
Yeah.
How is it going to help me? What, they don't really give a rip about you so much. Not that they don't, but they're really interested in how's it going to benefit them.
Yeah,
That's where
absolutely.
I always feel that especially in our market and our constituents we serve here, we have a real opportunity to help people with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that might be a nice transition a little bit into the podcast. And I think this, as we transition from InnerAction Media into your podcast, Positively West Virginia, I think there's a bridge here, and I want you to kind of talk a little bit about it. Jim, I've known you for many years, and you do not strike me as the kind of individual that's going to sit back and wait for things to happen. Your persona is very customer centric, and you said it earlier. You're like, Morgantown it's not a huge market, and I would imagine relationships they matter everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're in Chicago, New York, or you're in Morgantown. They matter everywhere, but I have no doubt what you do, the services and the product that you offer your customers is fantastic. Check the box. If you didn't have that check, you wouldn't be in business. But I also believe when I hear how involved you are in the community and it's about helping people, I mean, that's probably had a big success, or it's been a big factor in your success since you've been in business. And it's why you have customers that have been with you for 10 years, and it might transition a little bit into where the idea of Positively West Virginia came from.
Yeah.
So, and maybe you can, I don't know if you have any thoughts about, just because obviously you need to market yourself to potential customers in the area, and I'm sure, I mean, I'd like to know how you do that, but I'm sure there's, I guess, to put a period on InnerAction, maybe your philosophy on the relationship part of it, because I think that is sometimes forgotten, especially in our industry.
Absolutely. And, you're right. Morgantown, relationships are very important. You could, it takes a long time to build a reputation, but just one incident and ruin your reputation, right? And ruin that credibility that you have, right? So, I always think about it in terms of, having visibility in the community and credibility. And those two things, if you do them right, you'll have profitability. And, I think about, when you mentioned community involvement, I'm just, I don't really think about this too often, but when you mentioned it, I kind of went through my brain, like all the different things that I am involved with. And sometimes it's daunting. One of the coolest things, I'll mention this to you guys just because I love it. This one of the coolest things I get to do in my life is that right now we're in our 19th year of Miracle League baseball here in Morgantown. And we built a field for kids and young adults with special needs so they can enjoy America's pastime, baseball. I'm a big baseball fan anyway, and that's one of the cool things I get to do is coach these kids and these young people who are in wheelchairs and walkers and have spina bifida and cerebral palsy and autism, and just to be on the baseball field with them and be able to see the progress that they make from not being able to hold a bat to actually swinging at a pitch and hitting the ball over the course of a couple of years. We turned our first double play this year, like authentic double play. And some of the parents were like, well, it took you 19 years, coach, to get them to do that. I was like, yeah, I know. But that's the kind of stuff that I love. I love stuff that breaks my heart if I don't help. I see a need, I want to go out and help. And so the formulation and how we came up with the idea of Positively West Virginia was kind of a fluke thing, to be honest with you. My wife and I, Rebecca, were at the State Fair in West Virginia back in the summer of 2017. I believe it was August. And I think I've told the story a couple times, but I'll just tell you real quick. We were at the Ag Building, and there's all these cool products, West Virginia products being made, everything from craft beer to wine to cheeses and all these different food, ag products. But one story that really jumped out, our Secretary of Agriculture, Kent Leonhardt, was there, and he's like, Jim, you got to come over here and listen to this story. And he introduces me to this lady. Her name is Brittany Ferris, and she owned a company called Family Roots Farm. And they had this, large grove of maple trees on their farm. This farm had been in the family generations, and they just decided to start tapping them and trying to see if they can make maple syrup. And he's like, the state of Vermont, what are they known for? I said, maple syrup. He's like, yeah, West Virginia has more maple trees per acre than the state of Vermont. And yet we're not doing anything with this. So here's Brittany she's doing this, and I learned her largest customer just from talking to her was in China, and she takes this maple syrup, basically dries it out and creates maple sugar and ships it across the ocean to China. Now I just thought that was super cool, and I'm like, we get back in the car, and Rebecca and I are talking, and I said, there's so many amazing business stories in West Virginia that their stories never get told, and somebody ought to do something about that. And just the way she would normally do, she looked at me, she's like, well, you own a media company, why don't you do it? And I was like, well, I used to like you. And then so, but those words just stuck with me, and I was like, you know what? I wonder if we could do something like that. And from August until December of 2017, I kind of mulled this over and came to my team with it and shared the vision, and we jumped on it. And one of my team members, I remember, I was like, we're going to do this for 1 year, and we're going to do it every week. And she was like, I give it 2 months.
Thanks.
But here we are, and we've been, several hundred, more than 250 interviews we've done now, and we have a couple of podcasts we're doing, and here we are, still thriving and growing this thing. And now it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We formed that at the end of last year. We're raising funds and getting some grants, funding work. We're working on that angle. But what's cool about it is, it was a passion project. That's how it started out. Now it's a whole movement that we're creating. And what I'm convinced is that we're on the right track. And here's why. West Virginia, and you guys may or may not know this, but we are a state that is it struggles a lot. Okay, we're always at the bottom of the good list. For economic power, for earnings. Unemployment, we're always at the bottom of the good list, and we're always at the top of the bad list, such as cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, opioid addiction. So, and we fight ourselves so much. But, and one of the biggest problems in the latest census that came out, we've got mass exodus. Over the last 10 years, we've had a mass exodus of our young people. And what Positively West Virginia is all about is trying to encourage and equip, and most importantly, inspire young people to start companies here in West Virginia. Just like we were talking about entrepreneurs a little bit ago, that's what we're trying to do. Get people to stay here in our state. You don't have to leave. There's great opportunities. And, we have amazing people here in West Virginia. And I think that's one of the greatest assets. And you guys, I know Kurt's been to West Virginia before. I don't know if you guys, Brian, Pat, if you guys have been here, but no matter where you go in West Virginia, you're going to find somebody. You could be pulled over on the side of the road in a pouring snowstorm with a flat tire, and somebody's going to stop and help you change that tire. Maybe take you home and fix you a meal, and then send you on your way. That's the way it is here. And it's just incredible. But by the same token, we struggle mightily with opportunity. And so my point is that sometimes we rely on these large companies to move in here and save the day, and then that may or may not happen. But the small businesses of West Virginia those folks are the backbone of our state, and that's really what we have to rely on. And I feel like that's in large part is the future of our state.
Hey Jim, I have a question regarding the podcast. And I know amongst all of us, we know a lot of people that are jumping into podcasts. It's kind of the hot thing right now. But what you find is people are struggling to find audience. People are struggling to find their message. People are struggling to find, how do I get it out and distribute it? There's a lot of people that are just, let's be honest, failing at it. You've been wildly successful. And, Kurt told me about you years ago, and I've been watching and listening. Not only do you have great guests, but you have such big numbers. So if you were talking to somebody that was thinking about getting into podcasting, what would be the 2 or 3 tips, or maybe some pitfalls that you ran into that they could avoid?
Yeah, obviously, I think, because I talk about this with some colleagues and stuff like that too. So I have some thoughts on that. Number one, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, marketing, right? You have to know your audience, right? You guys have an audience. You have a lane that you're playing in, and you're defining that. Just like with Positively West Virginia, we know who our audience is. We're trying to inspire those people who need some inspiration, right? It's young people, it's current business owners who may be struggling. They're trying to find community. So that's our target audience. And so understanding that, and then really, and it's okay to evolve your message and your why and your audience over time too, because I've definitely done that. But I think that the idea here is, being consistent. You've got to be consistent. We're doing these podcasts each week. About 6 months ago, we started doing like a behind the scenes look on Facebook Live, and we're using some different software packages to create a look and feel almost like a TV talk show now on the behind the scenes. It used to be just my face and audio from both of myself and the interviewee, but we weren't getting engagement because who wants to look at me for 40 minutes? But once we started putting the other person on the screen, I knew in my heart that was going to increase engagement and views, and it did. It shot through the roof. So understanding like how to have good production, you don't have to be polished, because if you listen to that episode 1, oh, by the way, Brittany Ferris was my first podcast on Positively West Virginia. That lady that with the maple, I should have mentioned that. So she was episode number 1, which was pretty cool. But if I go back and listen to that episode, it's drastically different. Production quality, my style, my ability to interview somebody, and then tie it into that passion, that why that we were talking about, man. Because I mean, to me, it's not work. I absolutely look forward to that podcast, and we do a couple a week now, and I love it. I mean, I think it's super cool. It's one of the cool things I get to do, like coaching my Miracle League baseball team. Doing that podcast it's exhilarating. And if I get to a point where it's not like that, I'll probably be in trouble because I've lost that edge. But find that passion, find your audience, and then just continue to work on your craft, elevate. You don't have to have a fancy microphone and a fancy camera. I'm looking right through this podcast right now through a Canon C100. I'm not, but the point is, we started with nothing. I just had nothing and just started and just kept building it and utilizing our team to make improvements along the way. So I think that may have answered your question.
That's great advice. That's great advice.
But the other thing is, and I think this is kind of a cool thing, and I'll try to say it the best way I can. But we have a media partner. Back in 2019, a guy by the name of Brian Jarvis bought part of my company. He saw what we were doing. He owns the largest news distribution channel in West Virginia called WVNews.com, and they have a bunch of newspapers and a bunch of social media channels and a bunch of email lists and so forth. And when that partnership took place, it gave us leverage to really amplify our message. Basically at no cost. I mean, because my partner owns this media company, so it was a really great partnership. So I would encourage folks to potentially look at creative partnerships to help get that message out too. Because as I mentioned a little bit ago, being an entrepreneur is hard work. Being a podcaster is hard work, but you can creatively leverage that by partnering with other people, collaborating. And I would urge people to do that for sure, because that really gives you scale, right? When you can go from 50 listeners per episode to thousands of listeners per episode, that's huge.
Yeah.
Jim,
go ahead, Pat.
Jim, at what point did you realize, hey, this is a thing? Like, right? You said, hey, let's just do it for a year. Let's just see where it goes. And you know what?
Yeah.
If we hit a year and you know what, it's not fun anymore, we'll throw it out, right? But at what point did you hold on a second, guys? This is gonna be something.
Yeah, truthfully, it was that first episode, because it was just so neat. And again, like I said, I was horrible. I mean, I was reading my questions, and you could tell that I was actually reading them. Nowadays, I mean, I'm still reading a lot of stuff, but I try to make it more conversational, But it was just powerful, and I felt like, wow, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. I could have, I could be the guide, I could be the facilitator of a conversation, and let these people tell their story. Right? Remember, we were talking about the hero of the story is not me. The hero of the story is the person that I'm interviewing, and just being able to elevate them, to edify them, lift them up, right? Was super cool. And I was like, man, this is really an amazing thing. So that first episode. So Pat, that's my truthful answer. But as in practical terms, when we started last year really getting really good traction was when we did those. We were doing a daily podcast, really in the middle of March. We did it for 31 days straight.
Wow.
And every day at 1 o'clock, we would go live on Facebook, and we called it the COVID-19 Daily Small Business Update. And we had lawyers. We had Senator Shelley Moore Capito on, our Congressman David McKinley, and they were calling to be on our show to give information to business owners. So I was like, well, this is kind of neat. We're like almost like a media entity here, and my team was like, yeah, this is real deal. We're delivering value.
Wow. Yeah.
And then that turned into what we call our Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind. And that is, not necessarily business owners, but we bring community leaders, political leaders, people like the Chamber of Commerce president, these kinds of people on a weekly call where we just have, we talk about topical business subject matter once a week. And that show's super cool too. It's like kind of like a talk show where we're really just discussing everything from the minimum wage issue to PPP loans, and talking about how to generate more sales for your business. We have a variety of experts that we just draw and have a 4 to 6 person panel every week on that. So that's kind of a cool thing too. Just a little spin on what we're doing, and it helps us promote the other podcasts as well.
Jim, full transparency, before when we brought your name up as a guest, I think what got us excited is that we knew there were so many ways we could take this conversation with you. We've talked a lot about, a variety of things with you, from entrepreneurship to, the 30-second, know your 30-second elevator speech. And even when you described Positively West Virginia, I'm thinking back to the earlier part of our conversation. That was your 30-second elevator speech. You knew right away what Positively West Virginia was all about. You knew your lane. You knew your audience. I mean, it's very specific. The passion that you have behind what you're doing is infectious. You can feel it. So it's something that's very important to you. It's filling a purpose. There's a vision behind it, and I think that's fantastic. I guess my question is, what has it done? Obviously, it's a passion of yours. I mean, I love the name, by the way. So like we joked with Jim before when we talked outside of this interview. It's like, for three folks that live in Wisconsin, we love it because Jim brings on some great interviews, some great guests, and the topics are relevant no matter where you live. So I do encourage everyone to check it out. What has Positively West Virginia done? We hear about what it's doing for you as an individual. What is it doing for your business? Because obviously, you're outputting content, and what has it done for InnerAction Media, and how are you utilizing? How has it helped you to maybe grow your business and to experience some successes?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kurt. And I think, just, like all of our clients that I serve got people, your clients that you serve, one of the things that they would all love to be known as is a subject matter expert, right? A subject matter authority, and having empathy for people, having compassion for people, but also understanding business. And so what this podcast has done is it's elevated our company. And quite frankly, I'm not a publicity seeker, but my name is out there a lot, and people, I'll meet people at a function, even in the lockdown and stuff, whether it's at a chamber event or a networking thing or something. People say, "Oh, I listen to your podcast." I'm like, "Oh, thank you." And it's kind of shocking to me. Like, I have a weekly column in the State Journal, which is one of our media partners through Brian's WVNews.com. In that State Journal, I have a weekly column in there, and I'll be at a family function, and some relative will say, "Hey, I read your article last week." I'm like, "Which one was it?" My wife will hit me. She's like, "How many do you think? Why do you have to say it like that? They think you're being cocky or something." I'm like, "No, I don't know which one they read, because I got so much stuff out there.
Yeah.
And so putting content out and doing it in a way that I think is, I try to do it in a way that it's authentic and humble, because I don't want to be, a publicity seeker, but I also want to, to help people, and I want these stories to get out there, and I want to give my thoughts, share them with people. If they get benefit from it, that's great. If not, that's okay too. But I don't want to just keep all this knowledge and subject matter expertise, if you will, to myself. I want to get it out there, and so I think that's the biggest thing. And then along the way, we've been able to amass a pretty significant marketing funnel, because we've got literally, hundreds and hundreds of people that have been on the show and that we have relationships with, and it's pretty cool. I kind of told you guys, and I'm going to send you a sample of it, but we send a box to every person that comes on the podcast. It's a really beautiful gift box, and then there's a Positively West Virginia t-shirt and a copy of our Marketing Matters book and some stickers and stuff like that, and a handwritten note that just says, thanks for being on the show. And then having residual contacts with them through our newsletter twice a month, and then just different things like that. It's just a great way to keep nurturing those relationships, because I'm a big believer, and the way I used to control my business was I just scattered seeds everywhere, and I didn't really care as long as they bore some fruit. I was happy, But these days, really since the middle of 2019, I started really focusing on, cultivating the ground, plowing it up, planting seeds in rows that are verticals, right? And fertilizing them and watering them. And, the good Lord provides sunshine. And those, what's happened now through the podcast and through the lead nurturing funnels and all the other things that we do, the column and the book and all that kind of stuff, what it's led to now is that we're harvesting crops. We're not just picking, fruit that may have fallen in the cracks between the pavers, and all of a sudden a plant grows up and bears some fruit. So it's being more intentional, being more thorough, being more helpful to people, and really trying to make a difference in our community here in West Virginia.
You know what I've noticed, Jim, and you reinforce it today, is authenticity. I think a lot of people jump into business or jump into podcasting or whatever it is, and I'm going to be self-promotional to land clients. It's not. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, I can see when I've listened to you on your podcast, you're genuinely interested. You're genuinely interested in hearing stories and amplifying those stories to help your community. And those are the bloggers that are the best at it. And let's say you're into comedy, the ones that, are funny but truly give back and care about their audience. I think that wins the day. So I always just caution people, before you jump into doing these things, don't do it just because everyone else is. Yeah. Have a purpose and be authentic.
Exactly. I mean, Brian, you're so right on that. And I think, the other thing I'll just say to add on to that, and hopefully this comes across, but it's a lot of fun too, helping people, doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of fulfillment that comes in that, and I remember, back in certain jobs that I've had along the way, Kurt, you and I kind of talked a little bit about that early on in this interview, but, you can do things for a lot of the wrong reasons too, notoriety or money or whatever, but if you've got your heart set in the right spot, and are truly leading people, leading your clients, leading your community, I think that's a game changer right there. It's really more about significance as opposed to success.
Yeah, great point,
Jim. I just love listening to you talking about, like, you've got your base, which is your company. And then the different spokes you have coming off the wheel, like, hey, we're going to do this, and now we're going to do this. And I mean, and that's the way I think business heads will really think about that. I mean, it takes work for sure, but I mean, you've got the book, you've got the podcast, you've got the newspaper column, you're right. These are all feeding into each other. It's a ton of work, but it's brilliant, man. Well done, sir.
Thank you. And I will say it wasn't by design, Patrick. It just kind of, over time, it just evolves, right?
That out. It was by design.
Yeah. But that's the way I did it, and looking back on it, it's been kind of neat to watch if I think back on all those things, and we made a lot of mistakes along the way and tried some things that didn't work, and and all those kinds of things. But once you start getting that, and you start getting, it's just like a lens on a camera. You start turning it a little bit, and then you're like, oh wow, that looked better, and then oh, that looked even better, right? And you kind of fiddle with a couple of the apertures and whatnot, and next thing you know, that thing's really in focus, and that's beautiful when it gets in focus.
So Jim, before we wrap up, I guess I'm going to give you the floor, and if there's any final things you want to share with us or our listeners. Obviously, we want to hear more about how people can contact you and outreach to you, and we'll obviously include that in post copy. But what are your final thoughts? Any final something you want to leave us with, or something you want to share? The floor is yours.
I just want to commend you guys first and foremost. I think this podcast that you're doing over a pint is pretty cool, and I think you're espousing exactly the things that we talked about too. It's about collaboration. It's about community. It's about helping people, and, I think, like I said, if I would have known all this stuff when I was, 22 years old coming out of college, it took me an extra year basically because I was, I was a musician in college. But if I would have known some of these things early, and I guess that's part of just maturing and going through life, right? It's part of the process. But man, I tell you, if you can just hone in on those passions, I don't mind sharing with people. My why in my business is that I look at my business as my ministry. I'm a person of faith, and here on our team, we believe in honoring God by serving people. And hopefully that came across in some of the things that we're doing here at our company or in our Positively West Virginia nonprofit. But that's really and truly what I believe and what our team believes, is that we want to go out there and really just help people, serve them, do it well. We're all blessed with talents and abilities. And I have this little saying. I work a lot with people with disabilities and that whole population. I serve on a board here for a local nonprofit that provides job opportunities. And I'll often tell people that I come across, young man recently had this conversation with. He's in a wheelchair and he has profound cerebral palsy. I said, God has put in you everything you need for your life. Everything you need is right inside of you. And I believe that's for everybody. We all have things, talents. We're put on this earth for a purpose, and quite honestly, it's over in a blink of an eye. So what do you do in that dash? You've heard that before. Your birth date and your death date. What do you do in that dash? It's kind of profound. And there's certain days, I don't feel like doing certain things. But you know what? I go, well, this may be the last day. I got to go out and bust it. I got to help do, contribute. And kind of like what I said about significance. I like that word a lot, because that really is when you're making a difference, right? You're making a difference. And I've heard it said, John Maxwell is a great leadership guru. You guys know who I'm talking about. And he said, I actually got to work with him on some video stuff years ago. And he had something that he said, once you taste significance, you never go back to the taste of success. I thought, man, that's a pretty cool way of looking at it, because you say, wow, I made a difference over there. I'm going to do more of that. I'm going to do more of that. So that would be probably my thing, is, find that passion, that your why, and understand like why you were put on the earth to be part of this community, and how can we love each other and help each other.
Jim, how can people contact you? We'll obviously include it. What's the best way to reach out to you and contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website's InnerActionMedia.com. My email is jim@InnerActionMedia.com. And my mobile number is 304-288-1503. I don't mind giving that out. And I love to just talk to people along the way. If somebody who's would just like to just chat, I'm open to that as well. And of course, our Positively West Virginia is PositivelyWV.com.
Yeah. Well, I will say this in closing then. I will agree, West Virginia is a great state. I have been to West Virginia. It's a beautiful state. Knowing you, since you live in West Virginia, I've learned a lot more about West Virginia over the years. And I tell you, Jim, if we would have said to each other years ago in the late 90s that someday I'll be interviewing you on a podcast, I think we both would have been like laughing and saying, what?
Kurt would say, what is a podcast?
Yeah, whatever.
What the hell's a podcast?
Yeah. But I will say this. So in closing, it was great to have you on, Jim. We always joke, and I shouldn't say that it's not a joke, but it's like, you like to surround yourselves with positive people, positively West Virginia. But we always say here at our agency at Celtic, you want to surround yourselves with positive people because, good thoughts, good vibes, they're infectious. And when you're around positive people, it makes you better. It makes you more passionate. You wear it on your sleeve, and I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud that we've been able to stay in contact all these years, and I mean that genuinely. You've been a great guest, and I'm looking forward to staying in contact with you beyond this. It's been a pleasure having you on as a guest. It's been a lot of fun, and Jim, all I can say is thank you, and cheers to you and all that you're doing. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, cheers to you guys too.
Cheers.
I appreciate you, Pat, Brian, Kurt. You guys are awesome. And come to West Virginia. I would love to have you. I'll take you trout fishing or bass fishing on my bass boat, or we'll go for a hike in the woods and check out some of the beautiful mountains here in West Virginia.
Okay, if you just said trout fishing, I'm in. Okay.
You got 3 people on your doorstep soon. Trust me.
We're pulling out the mystery van, the Scooby-Doo van, and Brian, Kurt, and Pat are coming on out to Morgantown.
And maybe we'll head over to Preston County and have a screech owl.
Nice.
Now you've got my attention. Thank you, everyone. That was another great conversation on Over a Pint. This was a lot of fun. Jim Matuga. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks,
Cheers.